In a forgotten corner of the world, where light dared not reach, lay a valley called the Abyssal Scar. It was here that Beelzebub, the king of the damned, began forging a cursed weapon. Knowing he needed a tool to subdue the gods in the coming war, he poured his sinister ambition into the creation. Sacrificing millions of human and demonic souls under his command, Beelzebub channeled their essence into the molten magma of the abyssal forge, ignited by an eternal hellfire. For 100 years, he hammered the blood-soaked metal, crafting a sword that exuded a fiery aura of doom. It came to be known as the Sword of Beelzebub. This sword drank the souls of those who dared wield it, turning its bearer into a puppet of destruction. To Beelzebub, it was the ultimate weapon to topple the heaven. The abyssal scar trembled under the weight of immense energy. Demonic armies lined the valley, watching as Beelzebub, the first demon king, grasped his creation with trembling hands. The sword of Beelzebub blazed with hellfire that flickered like serpent tongues, threatening to leap from its blade. "With this, I shall destroy the gods," Beelzebub declared, his voice echoing with boundless ambition. But something was amiss. The sword's aura felt heavier than expected, almost alive. Beelzebub peered closer, for the first time in millennia, sensing doubt. As he swung the sword, faint whispers crept into his mind. "Beelzebub. You think I'm your tool? You're no master, only a pawn in this game." Ignoring the voice, he raised the sword skyward to unleash its power. But the weapon resisted. Red flames erupted from the blade, coiling around his hand. Beelzebub roared in pain as the fire crawled up his arm, burning his once invincible skin. His army watched in terror, paralyzed by the unfolding horror. "You created me for destruction, Beelzebub. And I shall fulfill my purpose." The sword exploded with an immense force, throwing Beelzebub backward. Blood dripped from his body, a sight unseen for eons. Struggling to rise, he watched in horror as the sword levitated, seemingly alive, staring at him like a predator. "I am your creator. You belong to me," Beelzebub cried, desperation in his voice. The sword answered by plunging into his chest with unrelenting power. A flood of crimson light filled the valley as the weapon tore Beelzebub apart from within. His anguished scream echoed as his body fractured, turning to ash carried away by the wind. When the chaos subsided, the sword fell to the ground, standing upright. Its aura grew darker, as if it had absorbed the power of the fallen demon king. The demonic army, once loyal to their ruler, scattered in fear. They knew the sword was no mere weapon, it was an uncontrollable force. On the peak of the abyssal scar, the sword stood, glowing like a beacon of doom. One thing was certain, the sword of Beelzebub would not rest until it found its next master. Centuries passed, and the cursed sword faded into legend, whispered in hushed tones. But one young man, Cain, a hunter of cursed artifacts, heard its call in his dreams. "Take me, and I will give you the power to avenge your family," the voice beckoned. Driven by his thirst for revenge against the royal clan that had slaughtered his family, Cain began his journey to seek the sword. The world had changed since the Great War destroyed the Solaris kingdom. Cities lay in ruins, oceans turned to ash, and the sky was no longer blue. Cain trudged through the vast expanse of barren desert, his steps heavy yet resolute. The journey to the abyssal scar, a place spoken of only in myths, had drained every ounce of his energy. But one thing burned brightly within him, the desire for vengeance against those who destroyed his family. Abyssal scar. Does it even exist? Cain muttered, clutching the tattered map he had acquired from an old merchant at the cost of the man's life. The map depicted an eternal chasm at the edge of the world, where the cursed sword of Beelzebub was sealed by the gods. After months of wandering aimlessly, Cain finally arrived at the edge of the abyssal scar. The chasm resembled a gaping maw of the earth, with crimson mist seeping from its depths. A faint rumble echoed like the breath of a giant trapped below. "So, this is the place," Cain whispered, staring into the endless abyss. He unfurled the ancient map that had guided him this far. At its center was the symbol of a sword surrounded by strange runes. I must descend, he murmured. But he knew this was not merely a physical journey. The abyssal scar was said to devour the souls of the weak. Cain began his descent with caution. He tied a rope to a large rock and lowered himself down the steep cliffs, a torch clutched in his hand. Hot winds from below seemed to pull at him, threatening to drag him into the abyss. Each step felt like a test of his will. As he descended deeper, the atmosphere grew increasingly eerie. The crimson mist began to form vague, moving shadows, and whispers echoed through the air. "Cain, you've come. I've been waiting for you." Cain froze, his eyes wide at the sound. "Who's there?" he shouted, but there was no reply. He tried to ignore the voice and continued his journey. After hours of climbing, Cain finally reached the bottom of the chasm. The ground was red and cracked, and before him stood a massive cave with a stone gate carved with horrific creatures. A pulsating red glow emanated from the cave like the heartbeat of something alive. "This must be it," Cain muttered. He stepped into the cave, where the air grew heavier with each breath. At the center of the cave stood a grand stone altar, encircled by glowing red runes. On the altar rested a colossal sword, seemingly alive. The blade radiated an infernal aura that made Cain's blood boil at the mere sight of it. He approached the altar, but every step felt like a struggle. The whispers grew louder, beckoning him. "Touch me, claim me, and I will grant you the power to exact your vengeance." When Cain finally stood before the sword, his body trembled. His right hand reached out, but something within him screamed to turn back. Yet that voice was drowned by the flames of his burning desire for revenge. As soon as he grasped the hilt of the sword, crimson flames erupted from its blade, engulfing his body. "Arg!" Cain screamed. Agonizing pain coursed through him, as if he were being consumed from the inside out. In the darkness of his mind, a deep voice boomed, "You have been chosen, Cain. Your body is now mine, and my power is yours." But Cain refused to yield. "Take whatever you want from me. I only want the strength to destroy them." The crimson flames consuming him suddenly subsided, transforming into a protective cloak that enveloped him. Cain's eyes glowed red, and the sword now felt like an extension of his very being. Yet beneath the newfound power, Cain sensed a loss. His soul was eroding, and the sword's laughter echoed within his mind. "This is the price of power, Cain. You belong to me now." With this newfound power, Cain began his journey of vengeance. Emerging from the abyssal scar, he headed straight to the first city under the rule of the tyrant who had destroyed his family. There, he faced the royal guards alone. The sword, as if alive, guided his every swing. The bodies of the soldiers were cleaved in a single strike, and the crimson flames of the blade mercilessly engulfed the city. Yet, after the destruction, Cain felt an emptiness. He stood amidst the ruins, watching the flames rage around him. "Is this what I wanted?" he thought, but the sword's voice quickly interrupted. "Don't stop, Cain. There is still more to destroy. You are the unstoppable Black Knight." But deep inside, Cain knew something was wrong. Each time he wielded the sword, he felt himself losing a part of who he was. Still, he couldn't stop now, not after coming this far. The legend of the Black Knight began to spread across the world, but Cain knew that this legend was the beginning of something far darker. The sword would not rest until everything was destroyed, including him. Amidst the destruction left by Cain, news of the Black Knight, wielding the sword of Beelzebub spread like wildfire throughout the kingdom. When the gods commanded the holy warriors to stop him, they sent Lyra, a legendary swordswoman renowned for her strength and cunning. Yet Lyra was not the only one pursuing Cain. Lyra found Cain amidst the ruins of Corinthia, a city he had destroyed after slaughtering the royal forces occupying it. Cloaked in black and with a massive sword on his back, Cain seemed unbothered by the devastation surrounding him. "I know who you are," Lyra said, "and I know what you carry. I won't let that sword destroy this world again." Cain chuckled coldly. This world was ruined long before I came. I'm simply delivering justice to those who deserve it. Lyra attacked with lightning-fast movements, but Cain, now empowered by the sword, predicted her every move. Their battle raged intensely, the flames of the sword of Beelzebub clashing against the light of the shield of Eos. However, every time Lyra tried to get close to Cain, she felt an ominous aura emanating from the sword, making her hesitate. By the end of the fight, Cain nearly killed Lyra, but he hesitated when he caught a glimpse of sadness in her eyes. "Why do you care? You don't even know what I've been through," Cain said before leaving Lyra wounded but alive. Meanwhile, a mysterious woman named Eris, a dark sorceress who knew the truth about the sword of Beelzebub, decided to approach Cain. Eris saved Cain when he was ambushed by artifact hunters. Using her dark magic, she helped him defeat them effortlessly. "You don't understand the sword's true power," she said. "I can help you master it, if you trust me." Cain, who was beginning to lose control of himself each time he used the sword, accepted Eris's offer. However, Lyra, who had been tracking Cain, witnessed the conversation from a distance and started doubting Eris's motives. Eris guided Cain to the ancient ruins, the place where the ritual to unlock the sword's full power could be performed. There, Lyra confronted them. "Don't listen to her, Cain. That sword won't bring you justice, only destruction." Lyra tried to remind Cain that the sword had destroyed all its previous wielders, including Beelzebub himself. However, Eris twisted Lyra's words. "She just wants to stop you because she fears your power, Cain. With this sword, you can create a new world, a world without tyranny, without suffering." Cain found himself trapped in a dilemma, but the sword of Beelzebub, possessing a consciousness of its own, began to manipulate his thoughts. "You know who's right, Cain. They don't understand your suffering. Destroy them both, and become the ruler of this world." Caught in this conflict, Cain chose to fight against Lyra and Eris, each driven by their own motives. A three-way battle ensued, with Eris wielding her dark magic, Lyra defending with the shield of Eos, and Cain unleashing the uncontrollable power of the sword of Beelzebub. As Cain nears total submission to the sword, Lyra decides to make a great sacrifice. She drops her shield and embraces Cain in the midst of the battle. "I know you're still in there, Cain. Don't let this sword take everything from you." The moment shakes Cain to his core, and he begins to fight back against the sword's control. However, Eris seizes the opportunity to attempt to complete the ritual, summoning Beelzebub's soul sealed within the sword. When Eris's ritual succeeded, a massive shadow of Beelzebub emerged from the sword of Beelzebub, attempting to take Cain's body as its vessel. Realizing that the sword had only been using him all along, Cain decided to fight Beelzebub head-on, even if it meant sacrificing his life. With the help of Lyra, who once again wielded the shield of Eos, the two joined forces to battle Beelzebub. Eris, believing she could control Beelzebub, was ultimately betrayed and consumed by the entity. In the midst of the battle, Cain realized that the only way to destroy Beelzebub was to destroy the sword. However, the sword was bound to his soul. Lyra offered to use the shield of Eos to shatter the sword, but doing so would mean Cain's demise as well. "You don't have to do this," Lyra said, tears streaming down her face. "There's no other way," Cain replied. "This sword has claimed too many lives. If I can put an end to it, then this is the right choice." In his final moments, Cain used the last of his strength to thrust the sword into the shield of Eos, unleashing a blinding explosion of light that destroyed the sword and sealed Beelzebub away forever. After the sword's destruction, Lyra stood alone amidst the ruins, clutching the shattered piece of the shield of Eos. She remembered Cain as someone who had finally found peace. Yet, the whispers of the sword still echoed in her mind, "I will return. Someday." Lyra vowed to protect the world from the next resurrection of the sword of Beelzebub, even though she knew the sword's curse might never truly vanish.